Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world, chaos is our new normal. The election is over, but the fighting is not. And we're going to stay deep into it, and we're going to look ahead, and we're bringing back a returning champion, a fellow independent, and a voice that is very important now, especially as we figure out what the hell happens next. The great and powerful Joe Walsh is back on Independent Americans. Great to have you back, sir.
Shut up, Paul. I'm not the great and powerful. I'm a fan and a friend of yours. That's enough.
Well, I appreciate that. And I was giving you a little shit before we got started because if people should watch on video. This show is also on YouTube and on video. You've got this very cinematic, beautiful thing going on. That's kind of I'm gonna be very. It's very Carrie Lake-esque. Like if
I know.
So what is it?
It's a $20 piece of black cloth, you big jerk.
But you got the Steve Jobs black shirt on, you know, you're looking fit, but you do have this, like, it's an impact thing. It's a very Carrie Lake, you know, wizardry around your video to make you look a little bit more cinematic.
You and I are not suit and tie dudes. We're not.
No, we're not, right? We're not. So I think that's maybe going to be.
When was the last time you were in a suit and tie?
I had to fucking wear one last week, and it was terrible. I went to an event at the Council on Foreign Relations for a memorial event for one of my dearest mentors, Les Gelb, and Council on Foreign Relations, old school, Upper East Side. And I literally walked into that place and was having like a little bit of vertigo because I hadn't worn a suit and tie, and I hadn't walked around the city in a suit and tie in so long. I felt like a narc. I don't know what I felt like.
Paul, I don't think I've ever seen you in a tie.
Sometimes I got to wear one, you know, unfortunately, usually it's for like a wedding or a funeral, but I think maybe, you know, this is a time for fewer men and women wearing suit and ties. I think people are looking for authenticity and you know, fewer and fewer people are wearing suit and ties. It looks like only politicians. Even John Fetterman now has a suit and tie on. So I feel like when you wear a suit and tie, you're kind of bending the knee.
So not to carry this awkwardly into politics, but you and I've talked, this is a populist moment in American history.
Yeah.
And people are, you know, as well as I do, people are pissed off. They're pissed off at both parties, our politics, everything. Fuck the suit and tie. I want to fight and do something.
Well, I wore my old school Angry Americans t-shirt to kind of channel some of that energy. A lot of folks have been around since that show started almost 200 episodes ago. I'm excited to talk to you about Trump's announcement last night, about the election, about the future of the GOP that you used to be a part of. I want to talk about this rising independent movements and Andrew Yang and the Forward Party. But let's start with, where the hell are you in the world, and how are you as we come out of this wild election and all this other shit?
Thanks, Paul, and always good to be with you. I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. I'm uncomfortably here for probably one more year until I can find a place to land my independent ass. I can't go back to my congressional district because they hate me back there. So I want to find kind of an independent, purplish place to live.
Well, there are fewer and fewer of those now, right? I mean, that's part of the outcome of the election that I've been talking about, is the balkanization. Like, the red states got redder, the blue states got bluer. There are some exceptions, like California and New York are really interesting, which might be also an insight here. And I think there are a lot of takeaways from the election that I want to get into with you uniquely. But before we do that, the big news last night, Trump makes his formal announcement at a not star-studded and not energy-filled Mar-a-Lago. But you and I are in touch on Twitter. We've both been posting about this. I think it's really important to view it not just as a political story, but as a national security story. Yeah. And, you know, my view is you shouldn't be dancing on his grave just yet, because he's still got tens of millions of followers. And we saw Fox coalesce around him last night. I'm sure you were watching it too. All this, you know, my view, weak reporting on how Fox was going to abandon him. Man, they were in fucking lockstep last night, to the point where when he started to get boring, they would cut away and make him sound better. They would just rave on him a little bit and kind of gas him up. But what are your biggest takeaways from this announcement and this moment?
Paul, probably pretty close to yours. Maybe the only difference between you and me is, for the past 5 years, every day I hear from Republican-based voters, because that's the world I came from. And look, I would just, you and I know that every Republican donor, Republican bigwig, Republican elected official, most of these Republican consultants, they want Trump gone. They've wanted him gone for 6 years. They've never had the fucking balls to say that publicly. So they're laugh at him, dismiss him, mock the speech, do all of that, write his obituary, do all of that at your own peril. He's the leader of one of America's two major political parties. He is a cult leader. It's still dangerous. He's still the odds-on favorite to be the Republican Party nominee. Cut it out.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying too. And I think it's important, these folks all hated on him last time too, right? All the same. And this actually empowers him. He can fight harder against the establishment. Anybody who thinks that this movement is dead has been isolated to Manhattan and Beverly Hills. I mean, once you leave, the flags are still up. And in my view, I keep looking at it like a social movement, a political movement, even an insurrection is what I've called it, the American insurgency. It's been laying dormant. And now he's out saying, hey, everybody, come on out again. It's safe to come out. I'm back. And I think you're going to see that groundswell kind of pop up again. How big it will be, we'll see. But I'm with you. I think he's the odds-on favorite to be the nominee. I wouldn't be betting against him at this point. But what do you think about, let's talk about DeSantis. Let's talk about Mike Pence. What do you see as the opposition in his way?
Forget about Mike Pence. I know Mike Pence well. I think he's a good man. He made the worst deal with the devil 6 years ago. He can never get out of that. He's just not, again, this is a populist moment. Republicans want a fighter. They want a jerk. They want a bully. That's not Pence. So Pence has no shot. DeSantis is just a default place right now for Trump supporters. I talk to Trump supporters every day, and even the ones, Paul, who tell me, I love him, but I don't know if he can win. I think DeSantis could win. That's the only reason they're glomming on to DeSantis. I know DeSantis well. I think he's unbelievably overrated. He's got zero charisma. He sucks around people. He's a deer in the headlights. He hasn't been on the national stage. So part of Trump's advantage here is he's a son of a bitch. He's run for president twice. None of these other Republicans are tested.
And he's almost like I was debating with a kid in my building yesterday who's a teenager about NFL quarterbacks, and he was talking to me about the Eagles. And I said, the Eagles are great, but you don't have a quarterback with playoff experience. And playoff experience is when quarterbacks in the NFL differentiate themselves. And I think we see that time and time again. And Trump's a quarterback with playoff experience. And DeSantis, in my view, is all those things you said. And I also think he's not that bright. And he's tends to be thin-skinned in a different kind of way where he doesn't know what to do with it. And if I were DeSantis, I would not challenge Trump now. I'd wait for Trump to be out of the spotlight, wait for him to die, and do it kind of like what I think Buttigieg is doing on the other side with Biden, waiting for that space to clear so he can enter it. But if DeSantis, A, do you think DeSantis is going to run? And B, if he does, I think Trump's going to destroy him and put his head on a wall next to Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and all the others. But how do you see it?
I know DeSantis is under huge pressure because, look, the people who own and run Fox News, Rupert Murdoch himself, they've all called DeSantis and told DeSantis, we're done with Trump. We want you in. He's hearing from wealthy Republican donors every single day. But I agree with you, Paul. I think Trump would eat him up. Look, Donald Trump is a charismatic cult leader. It's hard to have a second cult leader. And DeSantis isn't that. He doesn't have any of that. This is a populist moment. Trump has a hold, I think, on 35 to 40% of the Republican Party base. I mean, a religious hold. If DeSantis runs and pisses off that base, he could ruin his career. And so it does make sense to wait, knowing that Trump will probably lose in 24.
Yeah, I mean, I also think, I don't know if he'll lose in 24, but I agree. I think DeSantis.
But either way, he's a one-termer.
I think what we're seeing, though, is the machine activating, right? And the machine, Fox News has been pumping up DeSantis for the last year, right? And very quickly, they're going to pop over to Trump like they did last night. And if I'm a Fox News leader, I want DeSantis to run because I want ratings. I want to watch Trump and DeSantis beat the shit out of each other for ratings on Fox, where the right is going to love that, and it's going to be red meat, and they're going to consume it. But Fox has been programming them that DeSantis is the heir apparent, that he's better. And I think that abandonment can happen pretty quickly, especially, was the old saying is like, once you get punched in the nose, everything is different. And I think we're going to see DeSantis get punched in the nose. So as that happens, Joe, how do you see the Republican Party evolving, disintegrating, fragmenting? Carrie Lake seems like she's positioning to be a VP. I've said that I think Trump is not only going to announce, he's going to focus his ire and his anger and his movement on Georgia and Arizona, where that can be a focal point for just a fight. Hey, y'all, I'm back. Let's fight. Let's start with Georgia and Arizona. How do you see that panning out? And where do you see the Kinzingers and the Liz Cheneys of the world, where, a couple months ago we were saying they might be independents. Now maybe they're going to stay inside and try to fight it out. How do you see that all unfolding inside the GOP?
I wouldn't be surprised, Paul, if in 4 months Trump literally picks Carrie Lake to be his VP. He loves her, and she's an exceptional politician under that, make America great election denialism bullshit. Look, I've been saying ever since I left the Republican Party 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, it's a shrinking, dying national party. And that still holds. It's a party of old white men, old white women, they die. And the party's not replacing itself. The Democrats have their own problem because they're being pulled and lurched to the left, which is why where you are and where I am, this land of independence can and should only grow. Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. Kinzinger's a buddy. I know him well. We talk all the time. He knows he has no spot in this party. Liz Cheney knows that. They're hesitant to become independents, especially Cheney. Cheney doesn't need to. She's a Cheney. She can raise money. She's a legacy. I wouldn't be surprised, Paul, to see Adam leave the party once he leaves Congress, because he has no future in that party. If you're and Adam knows, Paul, like I could never go back and be a Republican and run in a cycle or two. They'd never accept me. They'd never accept Adam. It's a dying, shrinking party.
Yeah, but I think there's this question now of the Hughes and the Kinzingers and the others. We were thinking maybe they're going to be independents or unaffiliateds. Maybe the Republican Party breaks in half, and you have the Trump MAGA-ists and you have the more traditionalist conservatives. So I'm fascinated to watch the path for Republicans who haven't left yet. We had Michael Steele on this show. We've had Kinzinger on this show. They're all folks that, in my view, are having their names tarnished by the direction of the party, but they still haven't left yet. So the party's still kind of trading on their name, and I don't know how that's going to shake out. When you look at the election, Joe, what are
By the way, Paul, on that point, guys like Michael Steele and Adam Kinzinger and the rest of them who are still holding on to that Republican label, I get it. It's a fucking scary thing to step away formally, like I did almost 3 years ago. Because as much as you and I talk about independence, what do you mean independence? I don't belong to a team right now. I'll never bullshit you. I'll never bullshit anybody. I've thought about becoming a Democrat, like a real conservative Democrat. And part of it is I want to belong to a fucking team. I feel like for the last 3 years, we've got this fight on the battlefield between Republicans and Democrats. I'm like a consultant on the side of the field advising Democrats. I'm tired of that. I want to be on the fucking field. And so you feel like you need to be on a team. You know that.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what I'm trying to build. And I think others are trying to build. We're trying to unite the folks that are unaffiliated in ways that we can, even if only through conversations on this show and in other places. We've had Michael Smerconic on. I mean, there's another side of this too, which is Tulsi Gabbard, right? And these other fragmented pieces of audiences that are breaking off. And I want to come to this independent piece in a moment. But before we do, the Democrats, the election, I think they're spiking the ball in a way that is very Democrat-like. The big story for me is not just that they won and that the Trump people lost, but the Trump people are still getting 49% in these states, right? And they took big losses in places like New York. Lee Zeldin almost beat Kathy Hochul. I mean, there's an anger and a disgust that you and I have talked about with the Democrats that I think is underappreciated, especially in the media. And in my view, it's the Democrat brand, right? The Democrat brand is still viewed as weak and liberal and fragmented and maybe too far left. But what's your big takeaways from the election now that the dust has started to settle?
My biggest concern for Democrats is yours. They defied history. And I think because they defied history, I don't think they'll self-reflect. And they still need to fucking self-reflect, because the Democrats have become the party of woke, elitist, out-of-touch liberals. Paul, you've heard me say this. I talk to low information, unaffiliated voters every day who like neither party. And what they've told me for 2 years is, yeah, Joe, Republicans are assholes, but Democrats are elitists who don't understand me. Democrats still have that problem. Working class, blue collar Americans who don't like either party. They don't feel at home in either party, but generally they're going to side with the asshole if they vote. So this is a real big problem. The Democrats won because of Dobbs. I think the abortion issue was so much bigger. I think it was bigger than the election denialism issue. But the Democrats defied history because of Dobbs. God bless Biden for making democracy an issue, and Trump. Trump inserted himself and became like an incumbent almost.
Yeah, but I think they also got, the downside of Trump without the real upside for the Republicans, right? Because he wasn't on the ballot. And if he's on the ballot and he's driving people actively in the way he's going to be now for the next 2 years, I think you're going to see higher turnout. You're going to see more focused mobilization. You're going to see more people fighting effectively in the media on the side of that group, which I don't support, obviously, but they're going to score more points because they're going to be better activated and better united. And I think that's what I keep looking toward. At the same time, where Democrats, Nancy Pelosi may be gone, right? And I know Nancy Pelosi. I respect Nancy Pelosi. And there's one thing you can't deny: she gets shit done. And if she's gone, Hakeem Jeffries and this whole other second level is not Nancy Pelosi. So you could very quickly see McCarthy changing the narrative, Trump amplifying the narrative, investigations into Afghanistan, investigations into Biden, and putting them back on their heels. How do you view independents that you talk to as sorting out in this period over the next year or two? They're not really excited about John Fetterman. They're not really excited about JD Vance. But where do you see them kind of sorting out in this next couple of months?
And Paul, I know this is what you think about every day and you're trying to work on, and I want to help you, brother, however I can. It's like there's no home for these people. There's no place to land. I mean, I'm a very high profile independent, as you are. We don't have a home. I think of all the Joe average people out there who are unaffiliated, and then an election comes along. They don't like either party, but they kind of have to support one of the party because, again, there's a fight going on. That's the battlefield. It's Democrats versus Republicans. Well, I got to choose sides. And until there's a home or another side for these people to go to, I think we're just screaming in the wind.
Well, I've talked a lot on this show about options for independents. We saw good news in Nevada, where question 3 went forward. There'll be open primaries, ranked choice voting. There's a very small chance that we could see the same thing happen before the end of the year in Pennsylvania. I think that movement is happening. I also think that the legalized marijuana piece of turnout helped Fetterman in particular. Republicans can bash him, but I do think that might have been like an X factor here that tends to capture independents. But you haven't been on since the Forward Party launched. We've had Christy Todd Whitman's been on the show. Andrew Yang has promised to come on at the end of this month. We'll see if he does. What's your analysis of the Forward Party? And as a part of that, why haven't you joined it? Maybe that's a really good way to put a pin on it. But what do you think of the Forward Party, and why haven't you joined it?
By the way, Paul, that's why I love you, because you don't fucking beat around the bush. You ask the questions that most people want to avoid. Why didn't I join the Forward Party? I was under enormous pressure to join. I thought seriously about joining. I didn't join because my feeling right now is our fight right now is to save democracy. You want to change democracy, reform democracy, I'm all about it. But right now, my former political party is an existential threat to our democracy. I don't want anything to take away from that. There needs to be a third party. There needs to be a fourth party. I think it's coming. My problems with the Forward Party in particular are they don't fucking stand for anything. I mean, parties are people kind of coalescing around a set of beliefs, ideas, and principles. The Forward Party purposely avoids all that. I think that's a dead end. Andrew Yang, the other reason, Paul, look, I like Andrew Yang, but if Andrew Yang is leading or the face of a movement, I just think it's dead in the water.
So I've stayed on that point a lot because, the chief salesman of an idea and a movement and a party has to be effective, right? And I think there's, this is the Andrew Yang, a lot of the infrastructure, the on the ground organizers are going to come from his political campaign. And there's a lot of what he's doing that I'm rooting for. And I think his analysis is right. I just think his prescription is wrong. And the wrongest part about it is him. So let me ask you this. If it was somebody else, and let me pick if it was Admiral Mike Mullen, if it was Admiral Stavridis, if it was, I keep saying the ghost of John McCain has been strong in the last couple of months. If it had been someone else that did not have a background in politics, that wasn't changing jerseys, would you have joined it?
Yeah, Paul. And by the way, again, it's full disclosure. I thought about it, and they worked me and they pressured me, and I was almost there. But I stopped and I said, it can't be an Andrew Yang thing. So if you're going to launch this fucking thing, you better launch it with 5 or 6 really good names from across the spectrum. And maybe Andrew is one of them. Christine Todd Whitman, God bless her, forget about it. She's like yesterday. So it became the Andrew Yang thing from the beginning. Doomed from the start. That's their fault. I also told them, don't launch something 3 months before this midterm election. Wait until early 23 or something, once the dust is settled. But they were gung-ho on doing it now. I don't know why. I think it was a mistake. And they didn't surround Yang with bigger, better names. That's a fatal flaw.
I think that's right. And I do think that they do stand for something. They're not articulate. They're trying to say that they stand for ranked choice voting. They're trying to say they stand for breaking up the two parties. And I don't think Yang is communicating that well. When Christy Todd Whitman came on this show, she actually did it better than he does. Now, that may not be enough for people. They may want them to take stands on abortion, but I do think they're trying to stand for something. And what I've said is, if a third party just said, we stand for open primaries, or we stand for empowering independence, or we stand for disrupting the system for everybody who doesn't want the other two, that would be more compelling if it wasn't somebody who was a Democrat 11 months ago. So I wonder, is there any other leader on the spectrum that you see? We've got this older generation of the Angus Kings and the others who kind of call themselves independents. We see how many young people are registering as independents. 50% of veterans call themselves independents. Are there any leaders you see out there or organizations out there that you see that could potentially present an alternative to the Forward Party?
Paul, it's got to be younger blood, and it's got to be people who don't come from the political world. Businessmen, entertainers, The Rock, Mark Cuban. I know those names are always floated out there, and in theory and in principle, they fit this because they are independent minded. But it's going to take, and we're getting there. It's going to take a really big name or 2 or 3 who finally says, Trump, Biden again, fuck this. This is the greatest country in the history of the world, man. And we're getting there. But like Paul, I'm a great name, but I couldn't be the face of something. I'm too politically associated with something, just like Yang is. I think it's got to come from outside the political world.
Yep. Yep.
Well-known people who band together, or businessmen and women who say, time out, we're fucking better than these
I think that's right. I've said this before. I think there's a huge potential for people from the military. I think there's a huge potential for people from sports. I think there's a huge potential for celebrities. I think billionaires are really kind of the old model for independence, right? Like, I don't think Cuban is going to be the right kind of guy. I've said The Rock, simply because of his popularity, is a compelling case study to consider, right? But is there also not another piece of this that I think folks are underappreciating, which is there is a scenario where Trump could not get the nomination.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't get the nomination, he's running anyway, and he's going to run as an independent. Have you thought about that? And do you have reactions or analysis?
Well, that's the funny thing, Paul. A hell of a lot of his hardcore support isn't Republican. These are people who just attach themselves to him. They're independent. They're unaffiliated. They hate both parties. You're right about Trump. They're fucked with him and they're fucked without him. They can't win in either scenario. If he doesn't get the nomination, he'll burn their house down. Literally, he'll take his 25 to 30% of the people, and he'll either run again or he'll start a separate movement and keep them out of the Republican aisle, which will, I don't know, Paul, what's your thought? Which might muddy and dirty the whole independent movement again if Trump is out there leading an independent type of an effort.
Everybody always, the knock on independents is that they're a spoiler. And I think that's over exaggerated, and especially doesn't consider the impact independents can have on other than the presidential races and in places where there are ranked choice voting and other different structural changes. But I think if Trump runs, he will be the spoiler for the Republicans. And I think you give it to Biden. There's no way Biden loses if you have pick anybody. Let's say it's DeSantis and Trump against Biden. As long as Biden's breathing, he wins, because then Trump becomes the spoiler. And I think people always view the independent as a spoiler against, I don't want to oversimplify, against the good guy, right? And always against the Democrat in a way that hurts the Democrat. But this could be the guy who spoils it in the same way Ross Perot did for George Bush.
2 points, Paul, and I know you're aware of this organization called No Labels.
Right.
They've raised a shitload of money. They're hoping it's Trump and Biden again, and they want to put forth this unity independent presidential ticket. I think it's bullshit, and they're not doing any grassroots work. The other thing that makes the independent drive difficult right now is this: people like me. I should be at the forefront of starting a third party or an independent movement, but I'm not, because I really do believe the Republican Party right now is anti-democracy. The Democratic Party is too far left. They're wrong on most issues, but they still believe in democracy. So you got this thing, Paul, where one of the two parties is like anti-democracy. And so that's like taking the attention of a lot of our fight. You know what I mean? Whereas
yeah, I do.
It's hard to be focused on, let's start something new.
I want to probe on that, and I hope you'll stick around for a little extra piece for our Patreon members. Want to give a shout out to them. If you're not a Patreon member, folks, check it out, sign up, help us continue to bring this, and you'll get extra content with Joe, no ads, and some other good stuff. But I get where you're coming from, Joe, but is not your enemy, your enemy's friend, your friend? Because what about Evan McMullin, right? I want to focus on that specifically with you, because can an independent win in places where Democrats can't? Evan didn't win. It was further than I think a lot of us would have hoped, but he did better than anybody who wasn't a Republican since 1976. He had flaws as a candidate, but there was something to be learned there. And what is your takeaway from the Mike Lee versus Evan McMullin matchup in Utah?
I'll tell you what, Paul, that one bummed me out, because you talk about the perfect scenario. Utah, which is not a Trumpy state, Mike Lee former friend of mine who's become really extreme. The Democrats don't put up a candidate perfectly set up for an independent candidate to win or be right there. I was stunned that Evan did well, lost by as much as he did. I'd like your take on this. That really set me back on my heels a little bit. The fact that it wasn't closer.
Yeah, I think he started late.
Yeah.
I think there is some brand exhaustion with Evan.
Yeah, totally.
Where people feel he's a bit opportunistic because he's bounced around.
Totally.
He's not the most invigorating candidate on the planet,
Not
right?
at all.
I mean, there was a lot of energy around him, but I think some of that energy was around the idea of him, right?
Yeah.
If you have I'm going to use a really a good and bad example, a Herschel Walker, right? Like a former football player, someone that is an outsider, someone that can connect with people in a different way. I think that might have been different in Utah. And I don't know who it is, but I think we lose track of the fact that the candidate themselves sometimes go back to that playoff quarterback, right? Fetterman down the stretch was not great as a candidate. He was fumbling the ball. So I think you got to go back to the strength of the candidate. And that's where I see the real opportunity for independence. If Mike Bloomberg started calling 100 people and said, hey, I'll give every one of you $20 million if you run, and he gets half of them, then you've got a whole crop of people that can all take shots and probably do better than Evan McMullin and people who were Democrats and Republicans a couple of years ago.
Agreed, Paul. So I do think that, as you've outlined it, a dynamic, really strong candidate who's not super political and just says, I'm going to do this, running for Senate or in a few very targeted House districts, starting early. I think in 24, you could have 2 or 3 or 4 get elected. But that's got to take money and strategy. And as you said, Bloomberg or somebody seeding this thing to make it happen.
Well, I'm going to share more about my thoughts on that. I've been talking about a concept that I'm calling Operation Independence, where I lay out what I think is a national strategy, because that's the real problem, is there's no strategic planning around independence. It's one-offs here and one-offs there, and they haven't developed the bench. They haven't figured out the funding mechanism.
Hey, Paul, can I ask a question?
Please.
Who's they? Isn't the problem that there's not a
Say
they?
We, right? We.
Is there is there an independent organization, Inc.? Like, I wish there was.
There's not right now. And I think that's what I've been trying to noodle on, out loud and also behind the scenes. And I'm going to share more in the next couple of months about what I'm thinking. But I do think there's been a lack of strategic planning, and there's been a lack of strategic leadership. And I want to try to provide some of that. I'm sure you will, and plenty of other folks who've been guests on this show. But it's been spray and pray. It's been taking pot shots, and it's been throwing Hail Marys, and we need more of a movement that really captures all that.
And what would be Paul, what would be your goal of the movement? Like, is it as specific as you'd like to see a handful of independents elected?
I think you need to transform the political system to empower independents and unaffiliated.
Okay.
I think that is the goal, right? So that folks like us have, and that's a comprehensive series of things ranging from ranked choice voting to open primaries, public financing, research, right? Understanding more about who these folks are, voter registration, right? We know that young people disproportionately register as independents and unaffiliated. Well, we could be doing that and capturing that for our, I'm always going to use this example. I know many of our listeners are sick of hearing it, but The Rock, right? If The Rock stood up tomorrow and said, I'm the independent candidate for president, voter turnout, fundraising, a farm team, lower level candidates across the board. And maybe The Rock loses, but maybe you get a couple governor's mansions, maybe you get a couple congressional seats, and that's what a movement is. It builds over time and then culminates maybe 20 years from now with an independent candidate for president that can win.
The bottom line, big picture view here is, and this is why Trump got elected 6 years ago. This is why Bernie was so popular 6 years ago. Our fucking political system is broken. Most Americans get that. The fix is not going to come from inside the system. We are, Paul, we're at the onset. I wish you and I were 20 years old. We're at the onset of revolutionary change in this country. So I think a lot of the shit you're talking about is going to be happening this next 15 to 20 years.
Well, I was going to ask you what's next, but you just answered that question. I do appreciate all you're doing. I feel like you're also, you're on liberal media a lot, right? You're on CNN, you're on in other places that I
Because
think.
Fox won't have me on anymore, Paul.
But I think you're talking sense to liberals
Yeah.
when they need to hear it. I think the Lincoln Project and others have tried to do that. But I think it's going to be really vital, and they need a bit of a sobering right now, because I want them to do better than the alternative, and I want people to be honest and sober in this moment and still recognize that tens of millions of Americans didn't even vote, right, and are just so fed up they're checked out. And so I think your voice is really important, man. I'm grateful for your fight. I'm grateful for you coming on the show again, and I do hope you run for something and get back in the arena.
Hey, Paul, I want to compliment you, and then I'll shut up. I anticipate running again soon. I do. The Democratic Party, and this may not happen, should fucking have people like you. I'd say have people like me, but maybe I'm a little too conservative. But Paul, the Democrats don't have somebody like you who talks like you. I could put you in a fucking bar anywhere in this country, and you could talk to anybody. You could sit at the bar and shoot the shit with a regular guy. This is what Democrats lack right now. And they could broaden their tent if they had voices like yours. Have you ever, by the way, would you ever go back or ever become a Democrat?
No, I mean, I appreciate you saying that, because that run came at me a few times. It came at me in 04, it came at me in 06, and there was a concerted effort to recruit guys like me.
Yeah.
And I said no, and folks like Tammy Duckworth said yes. Folks like Patrick Murphy said yes. Now you got folks like Wes Moore who are saying yes. Why
did you say no?
Sorry?
Why did you say no?
I'm not a Democrat, and I don't, and I just never was going to lie about who I was, and I felt like the structure was broken, and I didn't want to compromise my integrity and my values because it was the only way I could get elected, right? And I've taken the harder road, and to quote Robert Frost, has made all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a day in the future where folks like us, especially the younger versions of us, have a path. And I want to open that door, but I think there's a lot of us that could have run, and we could be sitting in leadership in the Democratic Party right now, maybe in the Republican Party. And I'm excited about the potential of those people, because the ones that we really need in this moment and the ones that we really want to run are the ones who never have.
Yes.
That's the generation I'm excited about, especially from the national security and defense community, where Ukraine and Poland and China and Iran and everything else, I think, are still such a critical part of the story.
Brother, I love you, and I'll work with you to help you do anything.
All right, man. Well, I can't let you off the hook. Where are you going to run? What are you going to run for?
Well, first of all, I got to find a place. So I got to find my purplish independent district or state.
Yeah.
And I'll never be a Republican again. I probably will never be a Democrat. So I'd probably run as an independent.
And would you just going to roll around in a trailer until you just stop in a parking lot and say, hey, I'm going for it?
Raise a shitload of money from people that's the one cool thing, Paul. If you do run as an independent, the ability to raise small dollars is there now. You can really, because of Twitter and everything else, you can get noticed quickly.
Well, I hope when you announce you will come on Independent Americans to do it.
Yes.
I appreciate all you're doing. You're going to stick around for our Patreon members. The great and powerful Joe Walsh, thank you for all you're doing, man, especially in this moment. And until next time, stay vigilant.
Thanks, man.